Hello, everybody. How are you guys doing today out there? Of course, nobody can answer, but Grant, Andrew, we're here for another one of these, and I always love talking with you guys and um, taking the complex and turning it into a very simple conversation. I've always appreciated that, and I know your clients do too. So welcome today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.
What we're going to talk about today is the upcoming changes in QuickBooks, and there's been a lot of talk about what it is, what it isn't. And I think we bring a unique IT perspective from that, and we'll get into that a little bit. But coming out of this webinar, I think what you are going to learn is what's going on over at Intuit, why are they making these changes, kind of outline some processes to make the upgrade and really more about the choices you have. Um, and we'll go through each of those. And at the end, like we always do, we'll do or provide a giveaway from Succurri. So part of what we're going to get into is that roadmap. And basically, when when we look at what Succurri does and why this falls into something that we talk about and think it's important to talk about, um, Succurri is a managed IT service provider. So I'll say that. I'll let you, Grant, talk about, okay, well, what does that really mean and why do we feel like it's a public service to talk about these things that are going on with these big software vendors?
Why is an IT provider talking about an accounting software, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, it's true. I mean, most IT providers are not looking at it that from that perspective. Software is software, right? So we make software work regardless of what it is. We make networks work regardless of what it is. And so this is no different for us than any other software lifecycle management that we deal with for clients, or hardware lifecycle management that we deal for clients. It just happens to be that the vendor has made a change and is essentially tipping their hat to what they're looking at for going down the line and what's going to happen in the future. So obviously, there's a lot of doom and gloom to start out with when this announcement was made, a lot of misunderstandings or confusion that happened. The sky was falling for a little bit, that Intuit was shutting down QuickBooks and you couldn't get it anymore. I will tell you that that's not the truth. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in a couple seconds. So everybody just, don't worry, just take deep breaths, take your heart medication. We're good. But yeah, it's we deal with software constantly, and this just happens to be one more piece of software that we help our clients with.
Well, in
Yeah.
licensing and what's available, we get into all of that when you talk about software. So that makes sense to me. I get it. We'll get into there. So, okay, Intuit, this big thing, talk to us, Andrew, about why do you think they're doing this? What's going on over there, you think?
Yeah, great question. So Intuit's following the trend that all software companies are following, which is they've realized if they can get a subscription model for selling software versus a one-time payment, they can make their cash flows look a lot better. Recurring revenues are great as far as investment. People who'd want to invest in companies, they see that. Also, it really streamlines the process because the subscription means that you can always have the newest software. You get support included with it. And really, it's a set it and forget it. And that's what Intuit's hoping, is that you'll just set a subscription and continue paying for it forever. And so they can count on that revenue. So why they're doing this, like there's a couple of tracks that they're taking. So for years, we've all used the QuickBooks Desktop programs, which are great. We're all familiar with them. They're really easy to use. And if Intuit was to follow the trends in the industry, they would have made that license a subscription, and we would have just kept on moving. No, we wouldn't be having this webinar, and nothing would have changed. But I think ultimately what's happened, and unless you're in IT, you don't really see this, is QuickBooks is a really fragile program, and it was designed like 30 years ago, and they really haven't fix the foundation that the program's built on. So when it breaks, it literally unravels. I've watched customers lose their company files, and it just is like this spiral of data loss through the database that you can't explain, you can't fix it, and you just have to recover from a backup. So what Intuit is doing as well is they're also introducing the online version of QuickBooks and replacing that with, they're getting rid of the desktop versions where possible. And so what's happened, what stalled this is, instead of building an online version that looks exactly like the desktop, they decided to get fancy, and they have all the functions are all over the place. So strategy-wise, they didn't call me and ask my opinion, but I would have given them
What?
suggestions.
What?
Yeah.
How dare they?
I mean, I should sit on the board of so many of these vendors.
Well, I think what you're saying too is, just be it whether you're a CPA bookkeeper or one of their clients, just keep an eye on what vendors are doing. Intuit's like the biggest vendor in this industry, but it's such a core business application to everybody, because we all have to keep track of our profit and loss and balance sheet, and we all have to watch the transactions come in from the bank and reconcile those, and accounting, everybody's got to do it.
Yeah, Intuit's not alone, right? So we're seeing Sage, who's the other big boy on the block. They're shutting down different systems of theirs too, and forcing you to migrate to a different platform. So it's not uncommon in the industry. This one was just more of a doom and gloom. Everybody started to panic, and so that's why we're here today.
Right. Well, we'll talk a little bit about what it actually means and what it actually is. We'll go into detail, but the important point here I was trying to bring up is, and that you guys are bringing up, is keep an eye on what they're doing, understand why they're doing it, and then have your own strategy for what you're going to do with that software, how you handle licensing, understand your costs as they change, or may not need to change, but you go into it with your head up and eyes on what's going on, rather than just getting caught in it. And so really what we're talking about is no longer selling QuickBooks 2024 or excuse me, desktop, 2024 desktop or 2021. Basically 2021 is going away. And so when you think about why you do some of these things, or what you should consider as you're thinking about your strategy, and why you might want to move into the cloud if you're making a change off of desktop, and talk a little bit about what this is and what that strategy is going to the cloud.
Yeah, so just for a quick clarification, so almost all the desktop products are going away. So they are leaving enterprise, which has 3 flavors. And the reason why they've left that is that they cannot replicate the functions inside the QuickBooks Online that exist in QuickBooks Enterprise. Right. So if you're using QuickBooks Enterprise, one, make sure your subscription is current, because we don't know how long that's going to last either. But they will stop selling desktop premium, accounting, and pro. So those are the ones that are basically pulling off the shelf. However, if you have an active subscription, they will continue to update it. They will continue to support it. But that's the key, right? Is you have to have an active subscription. And if you have 2021, you're forcing to upgrade. But when it comes to going to the cloud, this is the time where you start thinking about it. You don't have to make a decision at this moment in time. You just have to start thinking about what are the functionalities that you're looking for. What are the irritants that QuickBooks brings you today? And those might actually get solved when you move to the cloud platform. Licensing changes. So you obviously have those financial implications that come from that. That's probably the most notable is that you only can have one company in QuickBooks Online, or at least that's how the one user, one company, where QuickBooks Desktop, you can have as many companies as you want. You just had one active user per company, or however many you had licensed for. So that is a huge change by moving to the cloud. So something really to take into consideration.
I think they're
Also,
also, just to interrupt there, I
yeah,
think they're also, one of the things you had down here was vendor support. I think for 2021, all versions, they're basically going to stop supporting that.
that's it.
Right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
payroll shuts down. Yeah, so they made that announcement a little bit back where you have to go to 2024. And if you want to continue to play ball, you have to have an active subscription using 2024. And then they will continue to support you on desktop version, so Premium Pro and accounting. You just won't be able to buy it anymore. So if you cancel your subscription and then try to and your support subscription and then try to go back and buy it again, the only option you'll have is Enterprise. So that's really, really important. That's all that happens in July.
So when you think about, now there are other options to talk about moving to the cloud. This is just one option. We'll go through multiple options, but kind of when you're thinking of licensing and the cost of licensing, maybe break down how, and I don't know if this Andrew or Grant can answer this, but they look at licensing a little differently depending on the version you're on, depending on what you're doing, right?
They do.
Yeah,
You want to run with that
and I can answer that. Yeah, sure. So so right now, like Grant mentioned earlier, if you have a desktop version, you buy a license for the number of people that you need to access QuickBooks Desktop. And then you can have as many company files as you want. So you can have one license and you can have 20 companies. But when you move to the cloud, you're paying for a user license, and that gets you one company. So for customers, and I have a lot of these that use QuickBooks and they have multiple company files, especially like for bookkeeping groups, that can become really problematic because now they have to have different licensing. It's not necessarily a problem. It's more expensive than what they were anticipating, but it is that way. So QuickBooks Online is one license, one company file, and then you basically buy a license for every company file or every company that you add after that. So you just have to make projections and plan that you'll pay for every single company file.
Right. So talk about their choices. They've got basically three choices. You can go to the cloud, you can buy or upgrade, or you can go to a hosted environment. And some people may, depending on where they're currently at, walk me through these choices, Andrew.
Yeah, certainly. So going to the cloud is the QuickBooks Online, which we talked about. So that's a web page and it's accessible anywhere. It does add a lot of benefits if you have a staff of people that work remotely and you're not all in the same office. So all of a sudden, as long as you have an internet connection and can open the web page, people are working. So, work on the weekends, work at night, quick access to see what's going on. So there is a lot of benefit in that. If you happen to have, like you want to buy or you want to upgrade, well, you basically just go to QuickBooks or Intuit and you buy a subscription for QuickBooks Online, and they will upgrade your existing QuickBooks Desktop company file. It's actually a pretty easy process. We've helped a few customers through it, but in general, they just QuickBooks or Intuit absorbs the database and your data is there. It just is in different places, so they don't know what to expect. If you're wanting to buy or upgrade a version of the QuickBooks Desktop license before the July deadline, I think we have a slide in here that has a link to that, but there's a page where you can go and buy those licenses. So like Grant mentioned, if you are upgrading or if you want to stay with QuickBooks Desktop, you need to get on 2024 version here before July so that you can continue to have that. And then an on-prem versus a hosted environment. So those are some techie terms we use. So on-prem means you're in your office. So if you have QuickBooks on your computer and only you're the only one who accesses it, or if you have QuickBooks like Enterprise on a server and your whole team gets into it, some people want to move those to the cloud as well, and they want their team to have access. And so one of the things we do is we help customers move to a QuickBooks hosting provider. And there's, I think, a slide that has a list of those as well. and or a link to the list. So that's kind of the upgrade paths that you would have.
So, okay, let's talk about the moving to the cloud, QuickBooks Online specifically. There's a few different things to think about if this is the choice you're making. You know, obviously, if you're used to desktop, there's a learning curve of learning how to maybe use the different interface. It's completely different. Talk about some other maybe benefits and some other challenges people might face moving to online.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah. So on the large learning curve, it's pretty substantial. I would make it the equivalent of like moving from a PC to a Mac, right? You're looking at this thing and going, yeah, I know it does the same thing, but it does not look at all alike. So that's probably like you have to kind of pay attention to what's going on, where, like Andrew said, things get moved around. All the functions are there, but you just have to figure out where they're at. So that one is probably the biggest hurdle for most people. Obviously, we talked about the one company and the visual interface being totally different. Our goal is not to slam QuickBooks Online today. So there are some good functions to it too. So streamline accounting processes. So there are certain functions that you can do in QuickBooks Online that you cannot do in the desktop version, that actually speed up accounting functions, reconciliations, ledger fixes, things like that. So that is available in the cloud side of it. And then also integrations. So if anybody's ever had an integration with QuickBooks Desktop, they have what's called a web connector. And it tends to be the bane of the IT person's existence. So I can only imagine it's the same for the end users that are using those web connectors, which is a integration. We'll call it that, where integrations in the cloud version are using modern type of integrations known as APIs. And so that allows for information to pass between different disparate systems, other third-party vendors, things like that, very, very seamlessly without having this little tool that crashes on almost seemingly a regular basis.
Right.
So there are some good stuff.
To add to that, yeah, and just to add to the integrations, pretty much every vendor that's writing an integration, like let's say you have a mobile app and it can connect to your QuickBooks, or you have a payroll program, or you have a business system you want to upload inventory, they're writing the integrations for QuickBooks Online. They're not writing, new integrations are not generally being written for QuickBooks Desktop anymore, except for by very specific vendors for QuickBooks Enterprise. So, you know, the writing's on the wall as far as where we're going with this. You know, so, but I will say, like, you know, we're not trying to trash QuickBooks Online. What we've dealt with customers is the change to the visual layout of everything is really, it's like, it is disruptive. It's pretty much learning a new program, and you're just relying on like, hey, I know it can do these functions. Actually, one of our attendees is an owner of a bookkeeping firm that we consult with, and she let me know she uses it all the time and actually loves it. And so, and I've been serving customers, and I had another customer that said they really, really liked it as well. I think if you never had used QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Online would be fine. So what we're dealing with is really, I'll call it like the splat, or like the plunge in the cold pool syndrome. Yeah. Like, ooh, a little colder than I like. And so we're all kind of kicking the can down the street a little ways.
I call it getting lost in the woods. You know, you get in there and you go, well, where in the heck did they put this? And why did they put it there? This is where they had it, you know. And I also want to say, I mean, not only are we not trashing QuickBooks Online, we're not trashing Intuit. This is just, there's some options out there. This is probably more in line with a Pro or Premier kind of, you know, moving from that versus Enterprise.
Yeah, they don't have the crossover for Enterprise. They specifically design cloud around being able to take over those functions, and so they've targeted that market. I'm sure they'll continue to build and get into the enterprise functionality, and at some point, desktop will go away in its entirety. It's just a question of how long.
So, I did include a link here. So if people are watching the video, it's kind of weird to type out, but you know, we can certainly get this out to people who want to see this and have this have this link, or you could just pause and I don't know. There's multiple ways to get at it, but we did include a link here if you want to buy or upgrade to 2024 if you're on 2021. But there's some things you want to make sure you have your current subscription.
We should have had a Succurri referral page for this one. So
Right?
every webinar we missed that boat every single time.
It's like, okay, strike one, you forgot to talk to Andrew before you did this. Strike two, you're not paying us our 10% or whatever.
Yeah. Note to
self.
So,
we always, Tony, you always ask, like, what's the one thing to take away from a webinar? And I think this slide is one of those one things. So this is one of the paths, is to stay with QuickBooks Desktop. You buy your upgrades right now, and you kick this problem down the road 3 or 4 years. So if you're looking for no change and you just want to be on target with where you're currently going, stay on the same path, this is all you need. Go to that link, buy one of these versions, get up to 2024, and you're good to go. And so I just wanted to highlight that, like, this is the takeaway slide.
And keep on paying for that subscription until you stop using that desktop version.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of, there are reasons, the one thing you might want to go this route versus the one thing you might want to go that route. This is one option. This is another option. And you guys had talked about this. Now this is, I guess depends on where you're at, right? Like, oh, do you want to go from, let's call it $1,000 a year desktop Premiere. By the way, I'm going to trademark that. That's another thing Intuit's got to pay us for. But to 4,500. So this is the hosted, I said on-prem. I should have wrote on-premise. No tech talk here, kind of thing. At your office, on premise.
Yeah, or even in a hosted environment too. So if this license is required regardless of where you're using the software. So this might be the start of your cost for enterprise. Because if you have a server, you have those capital costs that are involved in a server. If you decide to move this to a hosting environment, you've got hosting costs that are associated as well. And so what you see here is just the starting price tag of these systems.
It's just for the software. It's not
just
for the
software
it sits on or the environment that it sits in.
Yep.
And if you're on a box of some kind, you have to think about internet connectivity, speed of that box, all those things that go along with the hardware piece of it. Andrew, why do you think people, should we have this slide in here? Who are going to be the people that upgrade to this level, you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, this slide is the reason I recommended we do this webinar, is that you can see the cost contrasting of the previous slide where it's $700 a year, or it's $800 or $900, $950 a year. And then you bump up to $2,000, $2,500, $4,600. That's a big difference. And so what we wanted to do is not allow our customers to, not like let this just slide under the carpet, and then on July 30th or whatever the date is, they come to us and say, oh my gosh, I can only buy QuickBooks Desktop now. I'm screwed, or I have to go to QuickBooks Online. And that's a huge transfer of like what knowledge we have, and you're focused on that. So the importance of this slide is make sure you're doing, if you have your plan, or it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Revert back to the previous slide. Buy your license now.
Well, no, I think Andrew's making a really important point here, and that is, I'll take what you're saying and run with it a little bit, and that is, you got at Succurri, one of the things you want people to use technology, but you want them to be doing it in a way that's smarter. And so when you go into having to make a change, don't make a change that puts you in a box. And by the way, that box costs you twice as much if you can help it. Make sure you talk through those things. And there's a few different things to think about, not just, hey, how's my bookkeeper or my accountant going to work with this new piece of software? And maybe they might provide some support there, but also the licensing part of it and who you need in there. Those are, like you said earlier, those are conversations you guys have all the time.
Well, we always recommend.
And
so I mean, you have your accountant, right? You got your lawyer. You talk to those people when you're making professional decisions, right? We're the IT of that version of it. When you're making IT decisions or having to change things out, get us involved, right? It's easier to have that conversation when you're not under pressure.
Yeah, definitely.
So one of my primary roles is I meet with customers all day, every day, and we're realizing we're a managed services provider, but really people get more out of the services we provide if I help them manage it. And so part of that is we see all these road bumps coming down a long ways out. Like we're like, oh, that's miles down. We can totally course correct. We can totally address it way ahead of time. And when we go to that road bump, we're just like, and not an issue. But it takes time to talk through those things. So our goal in this webinar is education, right? Like we want to make sure that customers know this is going to happen, that if they don't make a decision within the time frame, they're going to have some financial consequences, at least as a significantly more expensive version of the software. And that's just it's unfortunate. Like we don't want customers to spend 4 times more. I want them to spend that on their IT budget, not on QuickBooks. So
there it is.
So it's always about the IT budget. But and then no one likes surprises. I mean, unfortunately, we bring a lot of change to our customers. So we're always those architects of change. But if we can help them prevent something that is disruptive, provides them no value, and saves them, it costs them a lot more money, then I'm going to do that. So that's really like I said, this is the reason this webinar exists, is for this slide.
Yeah. Here's that slide you mentioned earlier about the enterprise license, the hosting partners.
And I didn't actually answer your question. So, I'll go back. If you go back to the previous slide, you talked about on-prem or on-premise or in your office or hosted. So a lot of our customers have found that they want to retire their servers because they're expensive to support. When they have to renew the server, it's $15,000-$20,000 worth of equipment plus a project. And so a lot of them have still wanted to have QuickBooks Desktop, but they want the functionality of accessing it remotely and getting all their staff to be able to get in, getting their bookkeepers and their accountants to be able to remotely access it. And so Intuit does this, or actually a ton of hosting providers do this really easily. So if you flip to the next slide, this is a list of all the hosting providers that Intuit authorizes. And if you Google Intuit hosting provider list, you'll basically get this list. We've worked with several of these over the years, and we're actually, I'm not going to say good or bad. You'll have to call me for that because I'm not going to put that in a recording. But
they're not all created
we've worked
equal.
with some. They're not all created equal. I will say that we, as a courtesy to our customers, are actually working through interviewing the providers. We're not going to interview all of them, but we've gone through 3 right now. We're continuing to interview, and we're basically compiling what we think is our best practice list. And then one of them will become our preferred vendor for recommendations. And so, as we go through this list and we work with customers, that vendor has to be really reliable, really fast support. They have to, we don't want to get calls about their QuickBooks hosting service or complaints. So we're working to vet these for our customers.
So what you're saying, I don't know if people noticed that, it might have slipped through kind of quickly, but now is a good time if you have a server that's in your office or in a closet or on premise. Now's a good time to be looking at this because when you guys think about QuickBooks Enterprise, the terrain in terms of who are some good hosts to move to, how that works, what licensing you need, all of that jazz. That's really what you're saying. Well, if you're wanting to make that move because your QuickBooks Enterprise is slow or clunky or not integrated well, it might be a time to make the switch to
Yeah,
host.
and we see, so we talked about the server use case. So, what we get is customers will come to us and say, hey, my server's old and we're going to replace it. And so we give them a quote and they say, well, it's a lot of money. We'd love to move to Microsoft 365 for everything, email and file sharing. Oh, but QuickBooks is on our server. What do we do about that? This is the solution. You take your QuickBooks that's on your server or on a PC in your office and you move it to a hosting partner. The other thing that we find is a lot of businesses are trying to go virtual office space completely. And so they will like, hey, I don't want to have an office anymore, but I have a server. How do I get rid of the server? Well, this is how you do it, is you move your QuickBooks Desktop to a hosting provider. Anyone can get to it on the internet that has access and a license, and away you guys go. So it's a really easy way to, we call it a forklift. You just pick it up, move it, and you're done. Versus QuickBooks Online is like, ooh, it's a whole new learning thing, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So I hope that
basically what you're
answered your
saying is
question
you can
originally.
run the same version of your QuickBooks Enterprise just on a hosted server. So it's like it's online, you're running Enterprise, but it's the same versions. You don't have to learn new software.
Well, believe it or not, in a lot of these
Exactly.
providers, you can actually have desktop versions too. So you can do Pro, Premier, accounting on a lot of these providers. So it's not specifically enterprise. There's some so these providers, with them being certified with Intuit, they allowed some of that to happen. Enterprise by licensing is the only one that's able to run technically in a remote desktop environment, but Intuit's allowing them to provide that. I don't know how long that's going to last, but that does currently happen. So if you're on a Pro or Premier and you're looking to move it somewhere, you could do that with these partners.
Right. Well, especially if you have like Pro on a PC or laptop or something like, a heavy duty machine that's not a server, now's definitely the time to make it right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Talking about, okay, so what do we do to get ready? This is the slide I always say, okay, what are the things you want to have people stick in their mind, right?
Yeah,
And
if you're going to take anything away from this call or this webinar, check your subscription, because that's the ticking time bomb, right? So make sure you have a current subscription, get yourself on 2024 or whatever version you're running, and at that point, now you have the opportunity to start thinking about what you want to do long term. Like Andrew said, we're thinking that you probably have about 3 years. That's kind of their cycles that they run in. So the next piece that would happen is that they're going to stop payroll capabilities off of these versions, and at that point, QuickBooks without payroll may become problematic for you.
So if you're on any version of 2021,
well, yeah, that today, I mean, that's got to go away immediately because they're stopping payroll for 2021 immediately. So you've got to get your subscription. You have to get to 2024, and then you have a little bit of time to decide what you want to do. But those are the first things that you have to do. If you take, like I said, if you take anything away from this call today, check your subscription, get to 2024, and then at that point, you're kind of on that, you're up on the safe rock for from the tidal wave. But
going to 2024, you could say, oh, well, we're on enterprise right now, 2021 or 21. Let's and it's on premise.
still have to get to 2024. Yeah.
You still have to get to 2024, and you could still do on premise, you could just,
sure.
Or, you could maybe move to hosted if you wanted to.
Yeah, you're not forced to make that decision yet. The only thing that you're going to be forced to do at this point is if you don't have a current subscription and you let it lapse, you're done, right?
Yeah.
Even if you have 2024, they're not selling it anymore. So that's kind of like they've cut you off. So make sure you have a current subscription, make sure you're on the newest version, and now you're supportable till they decide to pull to drop the other shoe, so to speak. So that's undetermined.
But if you have integrations in 2021 and you're moving to 2024,
well, so that's something actually that's kind of interesting to talk about. because obviously integrations come from other vendors. And when you start seeing end of life for a specific product, vendors stop actually building those integrations or supporting them. So that's something we haven't even really talked about, but that's something to be aware of is your integration, something that's working on your QuickBooks tool set, the web connector may actually get abandoned by your vendor. And they may say that you have to go to QuickBooks Online. So that's something, any of your integrations that you have going on, you want to reach out to your vendor and say, hey, how long are you guys going to support this integration, especially if it's business critical? So that's another really important thing to take a look at.
Yeah.
Obviously, what are your goals, right? What are you trying to accomplish? And I'm just kind of doing these out of order, but
Sure.
Cloud first mentality is what a lot of us have taken. So how do you get your data into the cloud, whether it's in a hosted environment or if it's in the cloud? And if you have to be on-prem, how do we make that work with it not being a boat anchor? And then, worst case scenario, right? Get a 30-day trial of QuickBooks Online. It's a free trial. Get in there, poke around before you actually make the plunge, and see if there's any showstoppers in there. What we found is that the people that actually spend a little bit of time in there and get comfortable with the layout ultimately like it. So, the trial, it's free. Give it a shot. There's no loss in it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's all the same language, although from an accounting perspective, although the different versions might call certain things different. The nomenclature is what I'm trying to say. It might be a little different, but in the location, but it does all the same stuff,
Yeah, PC or Mac, it's the same thing. It's just, it does the same function, just the functions are in different spots.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought I'd open it up a little bit for Q&A. I don't know what we have out there. Let's see if we've got, a few folks out there online. If anybody has any questions, we could answer any questions right now.
I'm watching the chat. I don't see anything coming through. We do have several attendees, but I would just say we're so comprehensive that no one has any questions.
We answered every single question.
Or they've all fallen asleep at their desk.
Yeah, one of the two.
Yes.
Software.
But this is actually this topic was pretty well, when I was sending out to all our community partners, it was very well received. A lot of people came back saying, they're interested. Specifically if we have any folks that are bookkeepers or accountants and have customers and they want to educate their customers, we definitely feel free to share this. Tony, are we going to be posting this on our YouTube channel, or where are we going to make this accessible so people can share this?
Yeah, so we will have a link to this we'll send out an email after we're done. It'll be on YouTube. It'll also be on our website. And so people will be able to get access to it pretty easily. And like I said, we'll send out an email to everybody. Even we invited, folks who didn't show. The only difference is for the folks that showed up, we do want to offer a free review of your licensing. So subscription review. So if you have anybody, especially I would say, who is thinking about doing something a little bit more unique, this would be perfect for. Like you say, we evaluate this kind of stuff all the time. And I say Succurri evaluates. I don't evaluate it. Your teams do, and you guys do. So this is a really, it's usually baked into part of how they manage their clients. So that's great. But this is, take advantage of this. We've got a few people eligible for it who attended. Anything else you guys want to say about this?
Yeah,
I guess what
go ahead.
go ahead, Grant.
No.
So
You're the one who gets to do the review, so you get to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. So, basically what this would be is getting to sit down with Grant or I, most likely me, and we would talk through all of the scenarios that are currently at play in this person's organization for QuickBooks, and map out a plan and help them get to explore the various options and make a plan to get to their direction they want to get to. I mean, it could be as simple as, buy your subscription now and upgrade to 2024 and kick this down the road. It could be, okay, let's talk about QuickBooks Online and what are your integrations and what do we need to do, and working through that. So these are not things that require a network engineer like myself or Grant to help a person through, but we just see it time and time and time again with all of our customers. Everybody has accounting, everyone uses QuickBooks. And so we've just become really familiar with the process. Well, I couldn't tell you how to reconcile an inventory journal, but I can tell you how to set it up. The whole structure.
Well, and I slightly disagree with you that it doesn't take a network engineer to go through this process, because it doesn't take an engineer, but it does take a vCIO or a C-level that's done this for a long time, because we're talking about strategy, right? So we're sitting down and looking at what you're doing currently and saying, what do you want to be doing instead? And so then we're able to provide that guidance of how to get there. And as Andrew mentioned, there's not necessarily a clear path. There might be vendor integrations that have to be duplicated or even created, for that matter, on the other side of it. So there's not one single shoe that fits every single customer, right? And so while it doesn't take a network engineer, it does take a virtual CIO to have this conversation. So that's why Andrew gets to take the call.
By the way, if you just called up Succurri and said, hey, could you guys walk me through that? They would probably do it. I don't mean to devalue, but this is if you wanted to have a conversation with somebody, these guys are great. So, thank you for attending today. And like I said, we'll watch for the email coming out. We'll have some links in there. So this video will be out there and accessible. And yeah, really appreciate your guys' time. I know this is, this is something we do all the time. And we finally decided to just make it our conversations that we normally have on a regular basis kind of in the public. So I really appreciate that. I know the businesses I work with love this stuff. So thank you guys. Thanks for attending as well.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Let's go here. Stop recording.